The Navy base was quiet that evening. The sun was dropping low, painting the ocean in deep shades of gold and crimson. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Hale, a man who had carried 20 years of war on his shoulders, stood near the pier. His eyes were tired, the kind of tired that never fades even after sleep. He wasn't expecting anyone. Most days, he avoided conversations altogether. But that day, a young woman approached him. She couldn't have been more than her hair caught the dying light, and her steps carried both hesitation and courage. "Sir, are you Chief Hale?" she asked softly. Marcus straightened, his instinct always alert. "That depends," he muttered. "Who's asking?" She hesitated, her hands fidgeting as if she were holding back something too heavy for her age. I just wanted to meet you. People said you were the one to talk to." Marcus gave her a long look, the kind that cut straight through. He had seen countless faces, allies, enemies, civilians, but something in her eyes unsettled him. "What's your name?" he finally asked. She took a deep breath. Her lips trembled before the words left them. "My name is Emily Carson." The world stopped. Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. His chest tightened. That name, that cursed, unforgettable name, was carved deep into the scars of his memory. He didn't move. He didn't blink. His hardened expression shattered for the first time in years, and his silence was louder than any explosion he had survived. Emily tilted her head, confused. "Chief, did I say something wrong?" But Marcus wasn't hearing her anymore. He was back there in the jungle, in the dust, in the fire. He was hearing the last cries of a man who had once been his brother in arms, a man named Daniel Carson. And now, standing in front of him, was his daughter. The name echoed in Marcus Hale's skull like a gunshot. Carson. He hadn't heard it spoken in years. Not since that night. The base around him blurred, and his mind dragged him back to a place he had tried so hard to bury. The thick jungle of a foreign land, the damp stench of rain-soaked earth, and the constant hum of insects pressing against the silence of war. It was 2008. Operation Iron Dagger. The mission was simple on paper: extract hostages from a hidden insurgent camp. But missions are never simple. Not when you're a SEAL. Marcus remembered crouching low in the mud, his rifle pressed tight against his shoulder. Beside him was Daniel Carson, his brother in arms, his closest friend. Daniel was the kind of man who could make the darkest night feel less heavy. He laughed in the face of fear, and when bullets rained, he never flinched. "Stay close, Hale," Daniel had whispered that night, his grin hidden beneath camo paint. "We get in, we get out, and then you're buying me a drink back home." Marcus had smirked. "You'll owe me 100 by the time this war is over." Then came the firefight. The world exploded in flashes of gunfire and screams. Marcus could still hear it, every deafening shot, every desperate command overcomes. They had reached the hostages. 5 civilians huddled in terror. The extraction bird was inbound. They just had to hold position. But then the ambush. A second wave of enemy fighters tore through the bullets shredded the air. Grenades cracked the earth open. Chaos swallowed the team. Marcus remembered diving to shield a civilian, mud caking his face, ears ringing, and when he looked up, Daniel was there, holding the line. Daniel Carson. One man against dozens, firing relentlessly, refusing to back down. "Go, Marcus," he had shouted. "Get them out." Marcus had argued, screamed through the cums, but Daniel wouldn't move. And then the explosion. A fireball lit up the night. Marcus remembered the shockwaves slamming him into the dirt. He remembered the ringing silence after when the smoke cleared. Daniel was gone. Back on the pier, Marcus gripped the railing so hard his knuckles turned white. His breath shook, his body frozen between past and present. Emily Carson stood before him, unaware she had just pulled open a wound that never healed. Marcus Hale's jaw clenched, his throat locked tight. He had faced fire, blood, and the unbearable weight of command. But this young woman, standing before him with her father's name, was undoing him piece by piece. Emily waited, shifting uncomfortably. "Chief," she asked again, her voice soft, uncertain. "Why do you look like that? Did you know my father?" The words stabbed through Marcus like shrapnel. His first instinct was to lie, to bury the truth the way he had buried his memories. Tell her he didn't know, pretend it was coincidence, protect her from the pain. But his silence betrayed him. His eyes gave him away. "You did know him," Emily whispered, realization dawning. "Didn't you?" Marcus swallowed hard, his voice a low rasp. "Emily, you shouldn't be here." She stepped closer. "All my life, I've only had pieces. A folded flag, a few medals, letters that stopped coming when I was a child. Nobody tells me what really happened. They just say he was a hero. But I want the truth." Marcus turned away, staring out at the ocean. Waves crashed against the pier, each one pulling him deeper into the undertow of guilt. "You don't want the truth," he said, almost to himself. "The truth, it will haunt you." Emily's voice cracked, but she held her ground. "I've lived with the silence my whole life. The silence already haunts me." Marcus closed his eyes. The weight in his chest grew unbearable. He remembered Daniel's grin, Daniel's voice, Daniel's sacrifice, and he remembered the moment he left him behind. He wanted to tell her. He wanted to confess, but the words stuck, a stone lodged in his throat. Instead, all he managed was a whisper. Your father. He saved lives that night. More than you'll ever know. Emily's eyes filled with tears. Then tell me how. Tell me what happened. Marcus turned to her, his face pale, etched with years of unspoken torment. For a long moment, he said nothing. Just the ocean between them, roaring like the memories in his head. Finally, he exhaled, broken and weary. If I tell you, there's no going back. Emily nodded, her tears glistening in the dying light. Then don't hold back. Marcus's hands trembled slightly as he gripped the railing of the pier. For years, he had carried the memory like a locked chest, buried deep, never daring to open it. Now, with Emily's tear-filled eyes fixed on him, the lock began to crack. He didn't look at her when he spoke. His gaze stayed on the horizon, where the sun was dying into the sea. Your father was the kind of man you meet once in a lifetime. Brave, loyal, stubborn as hell. His voice was rough, pulled from the deepest parts of him. But more than anything, he was the one you wanted by your side when the world was falling apart. Emily pressed her lips together, holding back a sob. Marcus exhaled sharply. His chest felt heavy as the memories came back, each detail sharper than the last. We went in under cover of darkness. The mission was to bring hostages home. That was all that mattered. But the enemy, they knew we were coming. He paused, his jaw tight. They were waiting for us. His mind flashed back, gunfire tearing the night apart, shouts echoing through the trees. He could still smell the gunpowder. Hear the deafening thunder of bullets striking too close. Your father didn't hesitate. Marcus continued. When we reached the civilians, Daniel, he stood his ground. He fought like a wall between them and the enemy. And when the line broke, he told me to take the hostages and move. Marcus's voice cracked, just slightly. I didn't want to leave him. God knows I didn't, but he made me promise. Emily's breath caught. Promise. Marcus finally looked at her then, his eyes burning with years of unspoken guilt. He said, Marcus, you get them home. Don't you dare look back. My little girl deserves a world where her father meant something. The tears Emily had been holding back finally spilled down her cheeks. Her hand rose to her mouth, her body trembling at the words. Marcus's voice lowered to a whisper. That was the last thing he said to me, the last time I ever saw him alive. The silence that followed was unbearable. Only the waves spoke, crashing against a pier, like the heartbeat of the ocean itself. Emily shook her head slowly, tears streaming. All these years, no one told me that. They just said he died a hero, but no one told me how. Marcus turned back to the sea, his face etched with sorrow, because no one else was there to see it. Only me, and I've lived with it every damn day since. Marcus's voice grew unsteady, like gravel breaking apart under weight. He had never told anyone this, not his commanders, not his comrades, not even himself, in the dark of night. But now the words came, dragged from the deepest wound of his soul. When I turned to leave with the civilians, I kept looking back. I couldn't help it. Your father was still there, holding them off. He fought like 10 men. Emily, every time one of them tried to push forward, he cut them down. But Marcus swallowed hard. They just kept coming. The images tore into him, raw and vivid. He could still see Daniel mud on his face, sweat dripping, his rifle spitting fire into the darkness. The air had been thick with smoke and chaos. Tracer rounds streaking like fireflies of death through the trees. Then, the grenade. Emily's breath caught. Marcus closed his eyes, his hand tightening on the railing as if he were holding on to the memory itself. One landed near the civilians. I was too far to stop it. But your father, he saw it. He didn't even think. He threw himself over it. Emily gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. The chief's voice broke. The blast threw me into the dirt. My ears went numb. When I crawled up, he was down. The rest of the squad dragged me away, forced me onto the bird with the civilians. But Daniel, he never moved again. Marcus bowed his head. The words he had locked away for 17 years finally spilled free. Your father gave his life for strangers, for children he'd never met, and for me, so I could come back alive. I left him there. Emily, I left him, and I've carried that guilt every day. Emily's tears fell freely now, dripping onto her clenched fists. Her body shook, torn between grief and pride, pain and honor. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Only the ocean's restless roar filled the silence, as if the sea itself bore witness to Daniel Carson's sacrifice. Finally, Emily whispered through her sobs. He died saving people. That's who he was. That's the man I wanted to know. Marcus lifted his eyes to her, his own vision blurred with unshed tears. That's the man he was, and he loved you more than life itself. He died making sure his little girl would grow up knowing her father was no coward. Emily's sob turned into a trembling smile, fragile but real. You gave me back a piece of him I thought I'd never have. For the first time in years, Marcus felt something loosen inside him, a burden lightened. Even as the pain remained, Marcus Hale stood rigid, but his chest rose and fell with uneven breaths. His hardened face, the mask he had worn for decades, was breaking. You don't understand. Emily, he whispered, his voice raw. I left him. I left your father on that battlefield. I heard the blast. I saw the fire, and I walked away. His hands shook now, betraying the calm control that had once led men into war. Every night since, I hear his voice. I see his face. When the world is quiet, when I close my eyes, Daniel is there, and he's dying all over again. Emily stepped closer, tears streaking her cheeks. She had never imagined that this giant of a man, this SEAL chief with scars carved deep into his soul, could look so fragile. You think you failed him, she said softly. Marcus's voice cracked. I did. I was supposed to bring everyone home. That was my duty. Instead, I brought back civilians, but not him, and I can't forgive myself for that. His shoulders shook. For a moment, he looked less like a warrior and more like a man crushed under the unbearable weight of memory. Emily's own pain was heavy, but she reached out anyway. Her trembling hand touched his arm. Chief, my father chose that. Don't you see? He chose to give his life. Not because you failed, but because you were his brother. Because he trusted you to finish what he couldn't. Marcus turned to her, his eyes glistening, haunted, broken. But why him? Why not me? Why did I get to live? Emily's voice, though weak, carried a quiet strength. Because he wanted you to. Because he believed someone had to carry his story, his sacrifice. And now, you've given that gift to me. Her words hung in the air, like a lifeline pulled from the wreckage of his past. For the first time in years, Marcus let the tears fall. They cut down the lines of his weathered face, mingling with the salt of the sea air. He bowed his head, a warrior unmasked at last. Emily stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. For a moment, the broken soldier and the daughter of his fallen brother stood locked in a silence that said everything words never could. And in that embrace, Marcus felt the faintest flicker of release, like a chain he had carried for decades was beginning to loosen. The sky had darkened fully now, the last streaks of sunset swallowed by the night. The pier was quiet except for the rhythmic crash of waves, the smell of salt heavy in the air. Marcus pulled back from Emily's embrace, wiping his face with a rough hand. He was embarrassed by his tears, though he knew there was no hiding them. Not from her. I've carried this for so long, he said, his voice low and ragged. I thought, if I never spoke his name again, maybe the pain would dull. But it never did. Emily looked at him with a strength far beyond her years. Her father's strength lived in her eyes. That's because you were never meant to carry it alone. Marcus blinked, her words settling into the hollow places of his chest. He had always believed the burden was his and his alone. But now standing before Daniel Carson's daughter, he realized how wrong he had been. Chief, Emily said softly, there's something I want to ask you. He nodded, unsure if he could handle more, but willing to listen. I want you to come with me, she said, to see him, his grave. I've been there so many times, but always alone. I think you're meant to stand there with me, to tell him yourself. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. The thought of facing that stone, that name carved in silence, terrified him more than any battlefield ever had. For years he had avoided it, ashamed, afraid, unworthy. I don't know if I can, he admitted, his voice trembling. Emily reached out, gently taking his calloused hand in both of hers. Yes, you can, because you were there when no one else was. You saw his last moments, and I think he'd want you there, beside me. He'd want us both to carry him together. Marcus's chest ached, but it wasn't the suffocating weight of guilt anymore. It was something else, something lighter, though still raw. For the first time in 17 years, he let himself nod, slowly, hesitantly, but with a flicker of resolve. I'll go, he whispered. With you. Emily's lips curved into a trembling smile. Then maybe we'll both finally have peace. The waves rolled on, endless and eternal, as if the sea itself bore witness to their vow. And for Marcus Hale, the man who had carried a ghost for nearly 2 decades, the first step toward healing had finally begun. 2 days later, the morning was gray and still. A thin mist clung to the ground as Emily led Marcus through the rows of white marble headstones, each one a name, each one a story ended too soon. Marcus had avoided this place for nearly 2 decades. His boots felt heavy against the damp earth, every step like walking into a storm he'd never wanted to face. His eyes flicked across the endless markers until they stopped, frozen on the one name that had haunted him more than any other. Daniel Carson built father, hero, brother in arms. Marcus's breath caught in his chest. His knees felt weak, and for a moment, he thought he might collapse under the weight of it all. He hadn't expected the simple stone to undo him this way. Emily knelt down first, her fingers brushing against her father's name as tears welled in her eyes. Marcus stayed standing, his body locked, his throat burning with words he couldn't seem to form. Finally, Emily looked up at him. Chief, say something. He'd want to hear it from you. Marcus swallowed hard. His voice was rough, uneven, but he forced the words out. Denny, his old nickname for Daniel, slipped out, a name he hadn't spoken since that night. His chest shook. I should have been here sooner. I should have stood here years ago. I don't know if you can hear me, brother, but I never forgot. Not a single day. His voice cracked as the floodgates opened. I've carried the guilt, the what-ifs, the shame of walking away while you stayed behind. But Emily, he glanced at her, her tearful eyes watching him. She's given me something I thought I'd lost. She's given me your memory back, not as a wound, but as a legacy. His eyes brimmed with tears as he knelt beside Emily, his hand brushing the cold stone. You saved lives, Danny. You saved me. And now, I'll make sure your daughter knows every story, every laugh, every piece of the man you were. She deserves that. She deserves you. Emily pressed her hand over his. Together, they touched the stone, their tears mingling with the morning mist. For the first time since that night, Marcus felt something shift inside him. The crushing weight he had carried for 17 years eased, just enough for him to breathe without pain. Emily whispered through her sobs, "He's proud of you, Chief. I know he is. And he wouldn't want you to keep punishing yourself anymore." Marcus nodded, his tears falling freely. "Then maybe it's time I finally let him rest, and let myself live." The cemetery was silent, save for the wind brushing through the trees. And in that silence, Marcus Hellnavy's SEAL chief, survivor, Breder Finley laid down the ghost he had carried for half his life. The air outside the cemetery was lighter than Marcus expected. For years, he had imagined this place would crush him, bury him deeper into guilt. But instead, leaving Daniel Carson's grave felt like stepping out of a cage he'd locked himself inside for far too long. Emily walked beside him, her hand still looped through his arm. Neither spoke at first. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was calm, almost gentle. When they reached the parking lot, Marcus finally broke the quiet. His voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "Thank you for letting me stand there with you." Emily looked up at him, her eyes still red but her smile steady. "You didn't just stand there, Chief. You gave me my father back. For the first time, I feel like I know who he was." Marcus nodded, his throat thick. "And you gave me something I thought I'd never have again. Forgiveness." They stood for a long moment, the world moving quietly around them. Then Emily said, "I think he'd want us to stay in touch. Maybe you could tell me more. About the missions, about the times," he laughed. "About who he was, when the war wasn't chasing you both." Marcus's lips twitched, the ghost of a smile breaking through the years of steel. "I could do that. Hell, I owe you that." They walked to their cars, the weight between them no longer unbearable, but shared. Lighter. Before partying, Marcus turned to her once more. His voice carried the steady tone of a man who had finally laid his ghost to rest. "Your father was a hero, Emily, but you're his legacy. Don't ever forget that." Emily's eyes glistened, but her smile was unshaken. "And you're his brother, not by blood, but by choice. Don't forget that either." For the first time in 17 years, Marcus Hale drove away without feeling like he was leaving someone behind. The war would always live inside him, but the silence was no longer haunted. It was peaceful, and for a man who had thought he'd never feel whole again, peace was enough. The sea was calm that evening, its waves folding gently against the shore, as if even the ocean knew that some storms had finally passed. Marcus Hale sat alone on the pier where it had all begun, the place where Emily had spoken her name and shattered 17 years of silence. He stared at the horizon, the salt air filling his lungs. And for the first time in so long, it didn't sting, it healed. He thought of Daniel Carson, the brother he lost, the man who had stood unshaken against the darkness. And he thought of Emily, who carried her father's fire in her eyes. War had taken Daniel, but it hadn't taken his legacy. His story now lived on, not just in folded flags and dusty medals, but in the words Marcus had finally spoken, and in the daughter who would carry them forward. Marcus exhaled slowly, his voice a low murmur to the waves. "Rest easy, Danny. She knows now, she'll never forget." The tide rolled in, endless and eternal, carrying away the last of the guilt he had clung to for so long. And in its place, for the first time since that night, Marcus Hale felt something he once believed impossible: peace. Some stories don't end on the battlefield. They live on in the hearts of those left behind. Marcus Hale carried his brother's ghost for 17 years, but one name, one voice, gave him the strength to let go. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful true-to-life stories. ****. And if you want to see the full journey of the SEAL chief asked her name, her answer left him frozen, click the link in the description or pinned comment below. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life.